Hi, I'm Haidar Eid, and I'm an associate professor of cultural studies at Al Aqsa University, based in Gaza. And I'm also a BDS activist and a supporter of the one-state solution. The current situation in Gaza is, in fact, Gaza has been literally ghettoized and even turned into a concentration camp. This process of ghettoization has been going on for 12 years. When in January 2006, we were asked to go to the polling station and vote for our representatives in Gaza and the West Bank. And the results of those elections were against the will of Israel, the United States of America, and reactionary Arab regimes. And this is the reason why Israel, in cahoot with America and other reactionary Arab regimes, decided to impose a deadly siege on Gaza. But also, you need to take into consideration that two-thirds of Gazans are refugees entitled to their right of return in accordance with the United Nations Resolution 194. And this is precisely why people have decided to march and go to the fence of the Gaza concentration camp and protest peacefully and non-violently. And the result, as you know, well, the Great March of Return itself started on March 30th, and so far nearly 180 Palestinians have been killed and more than 18,000 injured. Most of them are young people, and many of them are children. Of those wounded, more than 4,000 injuries have been with live fire by snipers. Now, for a better understanding of the gravity and the horror of the situation, let's compare these figures to the figures that we had in the 51 days of Israel's war on Gaza in 2014, where the number of those wounded was around 12,000. So, yes, marches and demonstrations have been going on, and only yesterday is Friday, or rather the day before yesterday, I went to the eastern fence and I joined the demonstrators. Israeli soldiers responded by firing at us, by sending drones that dropped gas bombs on peaceful demonstrators, and it will go on and will go on until United Nations Resolution 194 is implemented. Okay, the third question is, from international perspective, it would seem that Gaza protests were ineffective because so many people were killed or injured. Well, I think it is unfair to blame the victim. And I think it is very short-sighted to think about resistance without sacrifices. In 1961, in South Africa, the people took to the streets, and the racist white policemen committed a war crime, a massacre in Sharpeville, where 69 non-violent protesters were killed and many more were injured. That did not mean the end of resistance against the apartheid system. 1976 and 77, the Soweto uprising took place, and hundreds of people were also killed. And in the mid-80s, the same thing took place. But without those sacrifices, Nelson Mandela would not have been released in 1990, and apartheid would not have crumbled and came to an end in 1994, when Nelson Mandela was elected as the first black president of multiracial South Africa. So apartheid Israel is to blame for committing these war crimes and for killing all those non-violent protesters and peaceful protesters. What resistance tactics are working on Palestine in general? Well, I've come to the conclusion that the best resistance tactic is popular resistance and mass mobilization, exactly like what is happening right now every Friday in Gaza, when people go and go to the eastern borders, and we've erected tents, for example, about 300 meters from this the fence of the concentration camp. The same thing is happening almost every week in the West Bank, when people protest against the apartheid wall. But that also has to be combined by or with a campaign of boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS. What resistance tactics are working coming from the international community? This is exactly what I'm saying. The international community is supposed to heed the call made by the oppressed Palestinians back in 2005, when the overwhelming majority of Palestinian civil society sectors and nationalist forces issued a call calling on the international community to boycott apartheid Israel, divest from it, and from international companies benefiting from its apartheid regime, and imposing sanctions against it until it complies with international law. So the best resistance tactic coming from the international community, the best tool of resistance, and or rather tool of support that is coming from international solidarity movements, is BDS, boycott, divest, and sanctions. And now in Gaza, for example, we are expecting the international community to impose a military embargo on apartheid Israel because of the war crimes that it has been committing against us in Gaza. What tactics are not working for Palestine or from the international community? Well, in fact, one of the things that we need to concentrate on whenever we have discussions with our international comrades and supporters is that our call, and or rather our struggle, is enshrined in international law and in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In other words, our call is for, or rather our struggle is for human rights and democracy in historic Palestine. And we are expecting every single supporter of Palestine to abide by that. We are opposed to all forms of racism, including anti-Semitism, including Islamophobia, all forms of racism. And this is why, if you want to support Palestine, you are expected to be a supporter of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Otherwise, you are in fact causing damage to the Palestinian question. All forms of anti-Semitism, all forms of bigotry, in fact, all forms of bigotry are rejected by us in Palestine. What actions coming from Palestinians or international solidarity activists are actively detrimental to the struggle against? Again, it is BDS. We will keep repeating. We are expecting the international community to impose BDS, boycott, divestment sanctions against apartheid Israel until it complies with international law. Notice it took the international community 30 years to heed the call made by the oppressed Black Africans of South Africa. Until the mid-80s, Nelson Mandela was considered a terrorist. By the way, the ruling party in the United Kingdom, the Conservatives, considered Nelson Mandela a terrorist, and they even called for the beheading of Nelson Mandela and other and ANC terrorists. Ronald Reagan of the United States of America considered Nelson Mandela a terrorist. It took the international community more than 30 years to heed the call made by the oppressed South Africans until 1990, under the pressure imposed by the international community and the internal pressure by mass mobilization on the ground, when Black, African, colored, Indian townships were turned ungovernable. So that mass mobilization with an international campaign of boycott, divestment, and sanctions forced the apartheid system to negotiate with the true representatives of South Africa. And that ultimately led to the end of apartheid in 1994. And this is why we are saying that what we are witnessing right now in Palestine is our South African moment. That moment, which is that dark moment, which comes before the dawn. And that dawn is a secular democratic Palestine where all inhabitants of historic Palestine, after the return of all Palestinian refugees, will live equally, regardless of religion, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of sex. Thank you so much.